appreciate you coming to my talk on user experience. I think it's something that often gets missed when we're looking at application development. But first, before I get into this, I would love to get a little bit more information about you guys, and then I can tell you a bit about myself. But to make me feel easier, I'm going to start with you. How many of you are developers? Raise your hands. All right. How many of you are business owners, overseers, managers? Okay. Yeah, I know. You can raise your hand more than once. That's allowed. How many of you are designers? Awesome. All right. Fantastic. Anybody that I'm missing? Has anyone not raised their hand? Okay. All right. So, oftentimes when we're looking at... Oh, I need to start the screen flow for him. 1 second. Let's see if this starts. Okay. 5, 4, 3. Okay. So oftentimes, I think when we're building applications, the user experience is the part that we kind of maybe put on the back burner or don't really know what we're doing with. Maybe we have a good idea, but we haven't really implemented it. So it's something that I'm very eager to talk with you about today. I am a business owner, but I'm also a developer. And I do a lot of work with Joomla and work with the code base with Joomla, along with Michael and some of the others here. In addition to that, I also tinker with design stuff quite a bit. I started out with my undergrad with a graphic design major. Some unique blend of having a little bit of all of it, and I'm not any good at any of it. But I like to play around with it. In case you didn't see it, my name is David. And so let's talk a bit about user experience. Are we talking about the controls, the buttons, or are we talking about something greater? The one on the top, picture on the top, it's user interface. That's the design, that's what it looks like, that's the buttons, that's the controls, that's the labels, and everybody knows what's a popular one nowadays for user interfaces. What's one that everybody uses? Comes from Twitter, now it's on its own. Bootstrap, okay? Everybody uses that. It's a quick and easy way to have a really pretty user interface. Is that user experience, or is that user interface? That would be an interface. The bottom. That's your user experience, because it all depends on where the focus is. And both of these terms have user in them, right? Both of them are involving the user, but one of them is the interface and one of them is the experience. Okay, what we're talking about today is experience. It's very, very important to make sure that we keep these two separate so that you have an idea of what it is we're trying to focus on. We're not trying to focus on the user interface, how pretty something is, how it lays out on the page. What we're talking about is the experience of the user, the person coming to the website. And there's 6 factors that influence the user experience. And we'll go through each of these and we'll talk about each of them just a little bit. And again, you can see the slides later. You can see it at the bottom here of where I got this design from and the 6 points. First of all, with user experience, it needs to be useful. Your content should be original, and it should fulfill a need. Second of all, desirable. It should be about your brand, your image, your identity, and it needs to be something that evokes emotion and appreciation, because what you're trying to get across is the experience. You're not trying to simply put something out there that looks pretty. You're trying to accomplish a purpose, and you want it to be desirable. You want to invoke the right reactions. It needs to be usable. It can't just be so pretty that, oh man, that thing looks amazing, but I can't really use it because I can't find the close button. Or I can't really use it because I have no idea where I'm supposed to log in at. So it has to be something that's usable. It needs to be accessible. This one's a common one that gets missed a lot. Oh, findable. Sorry. Accessible. It needs to be accessible because we have to focus on being able for everyone to see it and to use it. It can't simply be something that looks pretty. We don't want to use a gray text on a white site because, it looks so soft and pretty. If it's not accessible to our users, if they can't find a way around it, again, it relates both to the accessible part, it also relates to the usable part. and then findable. We want to also make sure that it's findable so that the content that we're putting out there is useful, it's findable, it's something that people can easily navigate, and not just findable on your website, but it has to be findable off your website. So in your SEO, we talked a bit earlier about the microdata stuff with Joomla 3.3 and the importance of that. Really, that's where we come into the offsite accessibility. And again, the user experience is more than just what's on your website. The user has experience to your brand and your identity before they even get to your website. They have experienced something about your company, your product. So it's important that you're accessible and findable. It's also important that you're credible. How many of you have been to a website and thought instantly, whoa, I do not want to be here, right? Okay, you know those sites, and I don't even have to tell you what those sites look like. You just know the minute you land on it, where's the back button? I need to back up, go back to Google. They sent me the wrong site. You need to be credible in your site because that's part of your user experience. The user needs to feel like they can trust and believe what you're presenting to them. Okay? Can everyone see how this relates all in all to a user experience? Because at the end of the day, we want that user experience to be valuable. Because if that user values that experience, they're going to not only use you, but they'll refer you to others as well. So these are the different points of user experience. And I want to go through and talk a little bit about why this is important. User experience should be a priority that should in some way find a home within the design of any new media strategy. This was from Fast Company. And that's a longer quote, right? But it should be a priority. It says is a priority. And that's the part that I would question. Is it a priority? Or rather, should it be a priority? That's a longer quote. Here's a short one. UX is all about reducing friction. To give you a little background, obviously, I have an undergrad in teaching, in mathematics and education, so I love classroom settings like this. But I hate just being the one that stands up here and talks and everybody just sits back and listen or fall asleep because it's about that time of day. So I encourage you to interact, ask questions. I will try not to call anybody in particular unless I think that you're plenty comfortable and you can handle that type of interaction. Some of you, I think, can. Anybody have an idea what I would mean by reducing friction? Yes? The pain points. That's a really good definition. That's a nice short synonym, really, for reducing friction. Someone else?
Yeah, reducing aggravation.
Aggravation. Kind of goes back to the very first slide with user experience, right? Where the guy's head on the keyboard. That is the most annoying thing. And we'll look at some examples here. One example of reducing friction, usability.gov. Okay, so this is a US site focused on being accessible and easy to use. This is a short little video I took the other day. Okay? Just trying to get the pop-ups on the side of their page to work. Okay? That's aggravation, right? That's not what we want to see. And it's, a little ironic with the site that it's on. But you kind of get the idea, right? We want to reduce that friction with the user. Anybody else have an example? Reducing friction?
Steps to do something.
The steps to do something. So not only do we want to reduce friction with how it makes me feel, but how long it takes me to accomplish something. Or even how to accomplish something. So here's another example. Everybody know what this site's from? Right? This site has so many great examples. Remember, not every example has to be a good example. I just want to focus on one real quick. We got 3 really cute little icon graphics right there, right?
Right.
What does that represent? Can someone tell me what that's supposed to mean with those 3 graphics?
No.
Absolutely not. No idea. They're pretty to look at. They're nice. Is that in any way helping to accomplish the goal of what they want me to do when I look at that? I have no idea what that means. I mean, I could guess, right? Okay, that's something about, I don't know, me, contact, an email, the
What's that thing at the
website,
top of that
checklist.
What is that?
No idea. Someone go with a form, maybe? Let's say it's a form that I have to submit. So, no clue. Okay, so this is a perfect example. We don't want this type of stuff. Okay? The user experience. And this kind of touches on a bunch of different ones. And then immediately going along with what you just said, we want to make it as simple as possible to get from point A to point B. right? We want to find the way to reduce the friction by making it simple for the user. Because if they find my site simple to use, without making them feel stupid, because that's the key, right? We don't want the user to think, well, we think you're an idiot, so we're going to make this dumbed down because you're stupid. The trick is to say our users are incredibly intelligent, but maybe not in the way that we're doing business. So we need to educate them so they know why we do what we do, and we give them a straight line path to lead them along while not insinuating that they're the idiot. 89,100,000. If you Google good UX, that's how many results you get. So clearly, we know that user experience is something that's important. We know it's something that we need to be focused on. There's lots of content on there, on the web about it. But maybe, just because we know it, we're not actually implementing it well. Because 3%, that's the number of websites, according to a study done by Forrester, that use good user experience. So clearly we have this disconnect. We know we should have good user experience. We know there's importance in it, but maybe we're not implementing it correctly. Here's a great example. Cancel. Are you sure you want to cancel this action? Click OK to cancel the current action, or cancel to continue.
Just can yourself.
Cancel? I don't know. So this is a bad user experience, right? We've used too many words. We've used the same word too many times, and it's impossible for the user to know what button to click. And I've actually had this happen to me several times, and I think I have no idea, so I'm just going to pick one and go with it. Okay? So we'll look at some bad examples. We won't just look at bad. I tried to pick 3 bad and 3 good, so we can kind of look at a little bit of both. But some bad examples. Okay, so this is Microsoft MSN's website.
Very good.
How many of you have ever had a site that does that to you? Have you seen that? Let's do that again. So you go to the website, all of a sudden stuff starts moving, and then out of nowhere, we've got random stuff that just completely covered up the entire content. You can't access that website because of that stuff that's just gone all over the top of it. It's a popular form of marketing. It's a popular form of advertising. If your site is purely to get people to click on your ad, by all means go for it. But if your goal is to have a good user experience, to interact with that user, to have them as a customer, you don't want to do stuff like this, right? That's horrible.
It falls into the category of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's cool, right? I mean, that's pretty neat. I like the way it works, right? It's not inside a box. It kind of just takes over the screen. But I can tell you from first-hand experience there have been times when I've gone to a website, I know exactly what link I'm going to click on the main menu as soon as it pops up, the page loads, I get ready to click, boom, it's gone because something like this has taken it over. That's awful. That just makes me so frustrated. So, here's the next one. Does anybody recognize any of these pictures?
iStock.
iStock, right, yeah, right? We all recognize these, okay? Don't use stock photos. If you look at these pictures, does it tell you what my business does? Does it tell you anything about me as a company, or me as a brand, or me as a product? Absolutely not. It says, first of all, it says, I don't want to be transparent. I don't want you to know anything about me. So because I don't want you to know me, I'm going to put something up in front of me. I'm giving you fake information. Does that lend to credibility? Absolutely not. So we talk about 6 things of the UX that are important, that influence the UX. This right here immediately blocks several of those. Because now all of a sudden I'm saying, I really don't want you to see me. I'm wearing a mask. I'm hiding behind stock photography. Second of all, you have no idea what I'm doing. This doesn't tell me anything about what I should, as a user, come to the site and expect to find. So don't use stock photos. If you don't want to use your own photo, which is fine, choose not to use photos at all. Don't pretend to be something. Okay? Last one. This one's a fun one. VentureBeat.com. I tried this just to see the other day, and it still worked. Again, I went because I wanted a very specific example of something, and they were kind enough to give me several examples of things that I think are absolutely horrible. If you go to VentureBeat.com, How many of you are familiar with VentureBeat? You guys know what that site is? Okay, it's a tech blog. They talk on a bunch of different things. Their tagline is tech, people, and money. So they're a technology and news site. I went there because, I'll do it again, my goal, and I was on a fast connection, but my goal, let's see, can I get light points? Please. So my goal was to show the speed load, the page speed load. And it loads okay, but you can see like the main graphic that it didn't show. While I'm videoing this, to get the slowness of the whole page, I didn't even get to see the time it took for the whole page to load because it threw this ad up here. And not only did it throw an ad up there, but if you could see during that video when that ad popped up, first of all, it was completely irrelevant to the website. It's about BMWs. And, just so you don't give you wrong ideas, I'm using Firefox. I normally use Chrome. So Firefox wasn't tracking my personal habits and throwing an ad out there because I've been looking for a BMW. Okay, I'm not shopping for a new car. I am, but it's not a BMW, and I wasn't in Firefox. No. So it threw an ad that was completely irrelevant to my talk, to what I was looking for. Not only did it throw an ad, but did you see where the X button was on that video? Did you guys see that?
Almost hidden.
Yeah, that's right. It was almost completely hidden. Okay, here we go. So when this ad pops up, you'll notice right up here. Look at that. I was full screen on the laptop that I was on at the time. Okay, I could hardly even click on that because of the way that it's hidden. So not only did they show me an ad that's completely irrelevant, not only did the page load slow, and I didn't even have time to even look to see the page because now they're throwing an ad at me, I can't really even close it effectively because they've hidden the button. So, thank you, VentureBeat. Several examples of bad user experience. So, don't be stupid. If your user's coming to your site for a specific reason, don't show them something that they're not there for. If you're going to have ad content on your site, make sure it's relevant. And make sure that it's easy for the user to escape from, because they might not want to see it. Okay, let's look at some good examples. So, if we go to Airbnb.com, really like this site. Have you guys ever used Airbnb? They're fantastic. So if you go to their site and you don't have an account, you want to sign up, this is what you get. First of all, when you first load this, you only see two things. You see sign up with Facebook or sign up with email. 2 buttons, that's it. And I obviously am not going to connect it with Facebook. That's just beside the point. If I click sign up with email, how many boxes do I get? I get 5 boxes. That's it. With 5 simple little input boxes, I can join this website. Now, do they obviously need more information than those 5 little boxes to do something with Airbnb? Absolutely. But they chose not to put that in the startup page. See, once I've filled out 5 little pieces, I'm not committed. I'm invested. I've spent time to fill this out. It's short, it's simple, it's clean, so it's easy to navigate. I fill it in. Oh, now I remember. That was a piece of cake. And then I see, oh, I could fill in some more information about myself. And so I start adding little bits here and there. So here's an example of where we want to be short and sweet. We don't want to throw everything out there. All the information we ever want to collect from this user, we're going to put all on one page, all right at the beginning. Absolutely not. We want to make sure that we bring the user in. We give them a good user experience by showing them information that's relevant to them. So I don't have a ton of time to go through this particular example as much as I'd like to. But this is from the Android device. And Google has done some fantastic studies and some really, really good results on the user experience, user interface, and tying it all together. What they want to do with this, their goal was to be intelligent. Instead of always having these pop-up boxes that come up and say, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure? They just do it. And then they give you a way to undo it if you don't like it. So really what they're doing there is they're saying, we know you're smart. We know you chose to do what you just did. But here's a way out in case you decide you don't like what you've done. So once again, they've emphasized the intelligence of the user. They've given the user a good experience without insulting them. Let me see, did I post I didn't. I will post it, I'll tweet it, so follow me on Twitter, the link to where they go through the entire talk, because it's a really good talk. they go through a bunch of their different design philosophies on why they do what they do and why it makes that Android experience unique. It's really good. It's about 40 minutes. It was during one of the Google I/O talks. Definitely recommend it. It's definitely worth 40 minutes of your time. The really good part for me came around the 20-minute mark, so about halfway through. So let's look at another example. This is on Threadless.com. Anybody ever been to Threadless? It's like a t-shirt. You can get custom t-shirt stuff from them. When you add something to your cart, it says, one yummy item added to my cart belly. Okay? It's playful. It's fun. Obviously, you can't do that with every brand, right? It's unique to your brand, the voice that you're going to use, but it gives you a feeling of happiness. And that also relates to something that Google Android was wanting to do, is they want to give the user not only the feeling of empowerment that they're in control, but they also want to give them, it's a good experience. I feel happy when I read stuff like that. It's an opportunity to really get engaged with that brand as a whole. So, I gave you 3 bad, I gave you 3 good. The end goal is to reduce friction. We want to make the user feel happy. We want to make the user feel in control. We want to make the user feel comfortable. Because what's the key? The key to the whole thing, is the user. We want to focus on the user, what their experience is. If you had opportunity earlier to go to Deb's talk, she talked about creating these user personas, these user roles, and looking at it from a different point of view. It's fantastic way of implementing this, because what that does is it forces you to think like the user and not like the site owner. It gives you the opportunity to walk through it from someone else's viewpoint. And along those lines, that's something else that you should always be doing, is looking at how does it affect the user. So you do that through things like study groups. How many of you have ever participated in or run a study group? Okay, excellent. I'm so glad to see that. It's way more than I expected. You can learn so much. And your study group can be as simple as, hey mom, can you go to this website and can you download this? And then just watch and see what happens. It will truly amaze you. I mean, I have been baffled by people that go to Google to type in something to find a URL to go to some other website. I mean, the processes that people that aren't involved in tech all the time do just amuse me. And that's not to be insulting to them, right? Because I'm sure that there are ways in which they are way smarter than I am, right? This is the world that I live in. This is the world that you guys live in. This is what we do day in and day out. So for us, anybody that doesn't do that, it's unique, it's different. But for them, this is outside their comfort zone. So it's important to look at it from somebody else's eyes, from the user eyes. Because at the end of the day, we want good experiences. We want the user to have a good experience. So I encourage you to help your users to have good experiences. This involves being thoughtful in your planning. It means putting the user experience earlier in the development process. You don't wait until you get to the very end and then say, oh, by the way, I need to make it look pretty. And that covers my user experience. It doesn't mean, once we've developed it all according to exactly how I think it needs to be, at that point, okay, so now let's go to focus group and see how it works. No, what we need to do along the way, throughout the entire development process, is build in those times when you're going to get those input, that feedback along the way, to make sure that you're building this to the audience that you want to accomplish so that they have a good experience. So I mentioned you can follow me on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. I've got a bunch of different follow-up points, but like I said, I prefer not to just stand up and talk. I love to get interaction. So I've got some follow-up talking points that we can talk on, but I'd really like to turn this into a little bit more of an interactive session. So first I'll start by saying, are there any questions that anybody has that I can attempt to answer for you? And if not, I'll raise a couple points. Any questions? Has anybody had a good user experience that they could share quickly, where they found a brand, a product, a company that's done a good job of user experience? Yeah. Yes.
Join.me.
Join.me.
Yeah.
Has anybody used Join.me? That is a fantastic service. You're absolutely right. That's a brilliant one. Because what do? When you come to the screen, do you have a menu? Do you have a lot of content on the page? No. What you end up with are two boxes, right? You're either joining somebody or you're starting one yourself. And it's just that simple. That's a brilliant case. Yes?
I actually have a question. So user experience is definitely something to strive towards. You definitely want to have a good user experience for the users to encourage them to come back, develop a positive affiliation with your brand. And ideally, the user experience should be supportive of your website's mission.
Yes.
Like making it simple and clear about how to the calls to action so they can buy your items or what have you. But I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about when there's a conflict between user experience and achieving your website's goals. The light box is being one example where that might increase sales, but it is a less than ideal user experience.
A light box in what regards?
A modal white box
to
grayed out background.
Right. To accomplish what though? What would you use a light box for?
If you were having if it's a nonprofit, and it's an end of year donation, they're really pushing donations really hard.
So like on page load, like immediately presenting something to encourage a call to action?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, it's like that Microsoft, it's like that Microsoft page. I mean, they probably don't run that thing every time you load it, but they probably made a decision and said, you know what, for what they're paying for this, let's do it this time. They may lose a couple of first time visitors that say, yeah, I hate these things and I can't click on it. But if you're a regular user and you're going there to find your tech content or whatever, there's probably a trade-off, and it's probably a case by case. And some advertising sale, some account exec said, hey, the money that we're getting for this, let's do it.
It comes down to numbers. And to speak to your initial question, I think you raised a really valid point that needs to be brought up early on, and that is in regards to the voice. The voice of the advertisement and the voice of the entire business as a whole. And you want to make sure that they match. That's why, like the yummy something in my cardi belly, that doesn't really work for like a Microsoft. It's a completely different market. You have to match those two. And that kind of leads to the next step is, well, where do we draw the line and say, okay, this is okay for a one-time use thing or for an every other type of thing. And maybe that's where you get into things like it's really beneficial to run A/B testing, and you see what kind of a drop-off you get as a result of presenting that to your users. And if you can show that, hey, we lose 70% of our traffic because of this light box, then really maybe we can find another solution that accomplishes the same goal. We have a big click call to action at the top of the page maybe, but it doesn't interfere with the user experience. If you don't have a big drop-off as a result of that, then maybe it's okay to run that for a short term. That's where the value of something like A/B testing really comes into play. How many of you are familiar with A/B testing? How many of you have done A/B testing? Okay, excellent. Great.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with knowing who your end audience is, not necessarily the client, because if your average age audience is, let's say, 65 or above, and you come in with a 10-point font, then it's lighter font colors, and it's knowing who that is and making sure your client understands it sometimes isn't for them, it's for who's coming to the site, and making sure you're designing it, talking about Facebook logins, and the average, let's say, audience persona isn't using social media, you disconnect with them right away and they get scared and they run away. So it's really pinpointing early on what and who they are.
And that's exactly where the user persona, those case studies come invaluable, because what that does is that educates the site owner that we're not building the site for you. I mean, we're building it for you. You're paying us to develop it, but we're building it for what you really want, and that's your target audience. And rather than me just telling you what your target audience is, I want you to think about it as a business owner, put on your thinking cap and say, who are you selling to? What are you selling? And how are they viewing the site? So you're spot on. We don't want to, just because maybe as a techie, I know exactly what I'm going to do with a certain login box, my user may be completely different. And so writing a case study or writing a scenario for that user allows me to realize, okay, I need to change up how I'm doing that. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I
Yes.
think what has become hard with the user experience is you simplify, like you showed the one page, it only has a picture, the login like that. The problem with that is with SEO. You need some content on the page to get indexed, and that's where it becomes hard to mix user experience with SEO. That's when it becomes difficult.
So I think what's important, so can everybody hear? Do I need to repeat stuff? You guys can hear okay, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think what's important in that case is, yes, we can't always just go for simple. We can't always just go for what's the minimalist approach. What we have to do is, how do we do this the best way? And that's where the design aspect comes in. That's where the user interface, that first part, does become important. Because then we can emphasize the right things, we can de-emphasize the things that we don't want, we can focus the user's attention on the page at the right spot. So yes, there is a trade-off, right? We can't just remove everything, and that doesn't immediately make the user interface simple. We have to make sure that we make the user interface simple in how we design it, not just by taking stuff out of it. Yeah, that's a good point. Along the same lines, one of the talking points that I had was, we're not just talking about your desktop anymore, right? Now we also have to take into the mobile experience and the iPad experience and the different tablet size experiences. And that's something you have to consider. When we look at some of these examples, both bad and good, they may be good on the desktop. They may be horrible on the mobile. So you have to actually plan for different experiences based on your user cases, depending on the device that they might be coming from. So when you build out their personas, it might be important to also identify a persona that might be on a mobile device, might be on a tablet device, because those users are going to have a different experience, and you certainly don't want to give them a negative experience either. So, any other questions? Any other ideas? Thoughts?
I have a horror story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I went, and there's probably people here that also experienced it. I got a card to send in my fee for my LLC to the state.
Oh, yeah, I had that.
And they encouraged you to go online and register online. And it was, you talk about getting in there and getting into a continuous loop of horror.
Yeah.
I finally just wrote a check and put it in the mail. There was no way I could figure this out. And I'm pretty smart.
Mm-hmm.
I went, and then you click here, and you wind up back in the same place you started, which says click here again. And then it was like this continuous loop. And there was no way to figure out how to do this online.
So what do you think was the cause of that? I mean, what do you think led them? Because obviously when they created the site, that wasn't their goal, that's not their intention. They want to just take your money, right? So what do you think were the steps that caused that to be the end result?
Committee, yeah.
Right? So maybe a design by committee, maybe getting more people involved.
There was
that
really
need to
no
be
design.
involved.
There was no design.
There was no design.
And it was actually, it was not even, it was like a kind of a form-looking page, and there was no direction, so you just, well, let me click here and see what happens if I do that.
And it's the new site.
Yeah, this is the new site.
New site.
Yeah. I finally wrote a check.
So there's some good takeaways from that, right? The takeaway would be, okay, so when I'm dealing with customers and dealing with clients, and let's say it's a larger client, and they've got, they tell me they've got 70 people that want to be involved in the discussions on this.
Yeah, right.
The first thing you want to do is say, okay, well, let's limit that to who are the decision makers, and let's focus on them. And second of all, that comes down to education as well, right? We want to not only, we don't want to just minimize the number of people that are involved, but also want to make sure that they understand the decisions that are being made along the way, so that we can come to a consensus. So yeah, that's a good, that's a good bad example. Any others?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just an example, this may be kind of a difficult question, but say for developing like user interface, say that you have like a main function on your site, something that you're like most known for, but you want to start offering other outlets or components and things like that. Do you have any recommendations or like tools, tips, techniques for?
So that's a good point, because oftentimes you become successful with a single product, right? And that's your cash cow, that's the money maker, that's what people come to your site they're looking for. But you don't want to be known just for that one thing, and you also want to figure out how to introduce them to others. I think one example of this, I think Amazon does a great job of people that did this also looked at these. And that immediately gives them an opportunity. First of all, you sent them where they wanted to go. They came because they're looking for product X. But as long as they're on the product X page, you've got different suggested cells, either across the bottom, on the sides panel, somewhere else. There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. I think the key is not to take away from the reason why they came. If you know they came to your site looking for product X, you don't want to lose them because you showed them product Y. You want to give them X and then suggest something else to them. And that leads to the credibility factor. If they came for X, you show them X, and then you can credibly say, oh, and by the way, 70% of people that bought this also bought this. Now you're being an authoritative suggested, right? Because then I'm still letting you be in control of what you see, but at the same time, I'm letting you know, hey, you're as smart as 70% of other people, and they all bought this. Well, now I want to buy that too, because clearly they know what I'm doing. So I think that the goal is to make sure that you always give them what they're looking for first, and then follow that up with your suggestions. So it's a good question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, we'll take those goals, and if we can quantify them in such a way and say, so 80% of our objective is still to sell product number 1, but we want to introduce product number 2 and 3, and product number 2 is going to be 15%, product number 3, 5%. And this is a rough way of doing it. Then 85% of our real estate and images and language will be for product number 1, and 15% for product number 2, and so we'll do it that way. When we're picking out sliders, on the homepage or whatever, just the amount of content and that kind of thing. And that's a very crude overview, but a way to break it down.
That's a good idea. Yes, Steph.
David, he brings up a really good point. I've read a lot of stuff about sliders. That people hate them, they begin to ignore them, and that studies show that after the first one, hardly anybody clicks on the second and the third and the fourth. What do you think is a better design than that? Do you have a suggestion?
It's a valid question. It's one that I came across frequently, even in doing this. And there's a couple different points here, and I'm really glad that came up because I wanted to talk about it. In fact, it was on looking at it from a global standpoint of the traffic, people coming to your site, and the page load speed kind of coming into play again. Because when a page loads, for the most part, most people just load it progressively, right? It just loads straight down the page, right? So as that first header slider image loads, it loads through. And sometimes the click to call or the action for that major banner that you have at the top of your page is going to be located at the bottom. So that you're 1-2 seconds into the page before you even have your call to action button. And so the user has become more and more trained between that and the 728 by 60 or the 960 by 60 ad banner that goes across the top, the leaderboard. They've come accustomed to not even seeing that space. And you're right, there have been significant studies that have said no one even uses that space anymore because it's purely seen as ad space, and so the user just completely jumps right over top of it.
But every client seems to want to have the image sliders.
Right, because they come at it from their own perspective of, I'm looking at it looking for that space because that's a big key spot for me, right? So you do want to take advantage of it. And one of the things that I often will show clients are heat maps of where the common spots of the page are, and oftentimes you'll notice that's not a heat map spot. And it used to be, but it's becoming more and more less of a hot spot. The eye goes top left, top right, and then it zigzags down the page. And so you want to show them that and educate them on why that might not be the best spot to put the eye-catching piece that they really want, and use it almost more of a throwaway piece. If they want motion, if they want sliders, you can't really get around giving them what they want when it comes to motion on the page. Because first of all, you have to talk about Flash. Everybody wants to put Flash on there. And thankfully, we've gotten to a point now where less and less clients really want Flash on there, but they still want some sort of motion on the page. I usually discourage it, and I have found, and I could tweet them if you wanted, several that I use frequently when I'm debating someone that wants to have a slider on the page, and I say, here's study 1, study 2, and study 3 on these are not effective. The user either doesn't see it at all, or if it rotates automatically, they're gone by the time the third one, they never see the third slide. So there's very little value in this anymore. And really what I've found to be even more beneficial are the small targeted square ad space. Ad space, but I'm using it internally, right? So I'll advertise my products, and I'm going to place them, selectively where I know that the eye is going to catch. So always going to go top left first, and they're going to go top right, then they're going to zigzag down the page. At different spots along the way, I'll interject, a colorful little ad block and advertise a product here and there. And that's, for me, people tend to go along with that a lot easier because I've educated them first on why I'm not going to do that, and second, then I show them an alternative that will target what they want. So, yes?
When you say you're going to tweet it out, you're going to use the hashtag for this event, yes?
Yeah, I'll use JV14ATM. Yes?
Can you talk briefly and get a lot of clients that look at their bounce rate and no one really seems to understand what that is? What is a high bounce rate really telling you about the user when they come to your site? If it's in the 70s, 80s, what is that really telling you?
So the bounce rate comes in, and does everybody know what we're referring to with bounce rate? We're talking about, search engine, what you look at when you look at your Google Analytics app page, you see a bounce rate. It's going to vary on industry, on site type, very drastically. And in fact, there's a great post which was done by Google on the developer blog, which I recommend you go and look for. I apologize, I'll have to look the link up, but I'll tweet it. What it says was that you can delay the load of the tracker that counts that. So what that will do is, and you're not using deceit, right? You're not trying to falsely change your stats of your bounce rate. But oftentimes, and I don't know, maybe you guys don't do it, but I oftentimes will do a search result, click on the one I think is most relevant, immediately the site loads, and within a second, I know it's not where I want it to be, hit the back button, and I'm off the page. Well, if they've loaded that tracker instantly, then it's counted as a bounce under 2 seconds. And so that hurts my bounce rate, or it raises my bounce rate high. And as a result, it makes my site look like it's not sticky, doesn't show relevant information, it'll drop its search engine ranking, and overall it affects the quality of my site. So what Google recommends doing is setting a 3-second delay, or maybe even less than that, 1 second delay, on loading that tracker. So what that does is it immediately takes out everyone that's only just bounced there and bounced out. And then you get a much more valid bounce rate. And really, it depends, like I said, on your industry, on what is a valid bounce rate, what would be a good range, what's a high range. It really depends on the industry. Because sometimes if you have a blog, and that blog is only going to take me 5 minutes to read that post and then I'm gone, I'll look like I have a high bounce rate. But they come back every single day to read the next blog. So at that point, it doesn't matter if I'm at 60%, because I know I'm just trying to turn it over quickly. So. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to tell clients is it's a sign that they need to work on what they're putting on the homepage. That if it's high, they may need to think about changing the content or rearranging it, or what they think is the number one reason people go may not be.
Yeah. Well, and what comes out of that is actually reviewing the entire search engine strategy. Not just what that first page is, but also where the traffic is coming on the site. Because if everyone's coming to the site because they're looking at your third menu item, that's your most popular one, we're at a point now where the homepage is not really your homepage anymore, right? Google has made it so that every page on your website is your homepage. People are not going directly to your website. They go to Google, they type in what they're looking for, even if it's your domain name, and Google tells them where they should go on your site. So all of a sudden now, it's not just the homepage content that's important, but it's every page content that's important. And so when you look at the bounce rate, you have to also look at, yes, what the audience is looking for. Maybe it's not relevant. Maybe you have a high bounce rate because they're immediately seeing that it's not what they're looking for and they're going back. Then it does require content change. Or if you see a high bounce rate, you know your content is valid, then maybe you're optimized on the wrong keywords so that your traffic is coming on the wrong result. So maybe I'm searching for mowers, but I'm getting something that's related to weed eaters because I've used the word too much in my search engine strategy. So that means I have to re-optimize my content for the keyword for the user I really want, and that will lower your bounce rate as well. Any other questions? Comments? Snide remarks? I used to say that teaching. I always got the snide remark. I never got the questions or the comments. We're at 3:20, so I got about 5 minutes. I guess I need to do this. Okay. I need to have 2 more questions from people then, so I can have you fill this out. 2 more questions and then everybody can feel free to go. Yes.
Since you need one. Would you recommend or would you discourage motion, any type of motion if you're programming or designing for a mobile device? Since it's sort of small, I can understand it being on a PC or even a laptop.
Right.
To me, I would think being either on a tablet or a phone would not be very advantageous.
It's a good question. Here's how I would respond. I wouldn't say that I would discourage it. What I would say is I haven't seen a lot of effectively done mobile or tablet designs that incorporate motion. That's not to say that I wouldn't do it. I would hate to say that I'm missing out on something by not doing it. But if I can't look at previous examples of companies I think that have done it well, then there may be a reason for it. Because yes.
You have to be really careful now with the new responsive designs because the text will also become responsive. So what looks like an adequate font on a PC, all of a sudden on a mobile becomes very hard to read.
Yeah.
And we've had to implement on a current project where we actually had to go into the kind of the responsive theme and have a different slider show when it's on a tablet or a PC versus web because the text became too small. So we had to take out the text.
Yeah.
And use different images for that slider.
Sure.
I don't particularly care for it.
Yeah.
Then a lot of the motion to me just drives me nuts.
Right.
I like just static stuff. But
One of the things that's really popular. Let me get you to fill this out. There's 2 spots on there. If you could just fill one of them out, that'd be great, and I can meet my requirements. One of the common trends these days is using HTML5 motion, right? Where as you scroll on the page, things slide in, slide up, move around a little bit. That's really been the latest trend with using motion on the page, even on an iPad or on a tablet device. You see a lot of that. So I'd probably lean more towards that.
I'm sorry, I was.
That's not a problem.
I was writing
in HTML5, they do motion, but it's more of like slide in different elements and things like that.
You mean like parallax?
Yeah, it's like a parallax effect. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I know that you spoke about heat map as being a good reference for like being able to almost like see your development of user interface or how well it acts or whatever. But I was wondering if certain so like Stat Counter or Google Analytics, or if there's a certain program that allows you to track that.
So I'm not. What's that?
Usability.
Usability have it. There's one that I'm a pretty big fan of, but only because I'm friends with the guy backing it. Not too personally friends with him. Neil Patel. Has anybody ever heard of Neil? He does a blog. He's into a whole bunch of other stuff. One of his companies, which I think he may have actually sold at this point, called Crazy Egg. Crazy Egg is a fantastic tool. It's really cheap. It shows you real-time heat map tracking and clicks. So every time someone clicks on the page, anywhere on the page, it'll show up as a dot, and you can get this amazing overlay of your page. You can see everything that gets clicked on. So that's a really fantastic tool. I use it on a bunch of sites. What's that?
And everything that doesn't.
Yeah. So that'd be one that I would recommend. He's also behind Kissmetrics, which is another product, which I think he may have sold that one as well by now. But both Crazy Egg and Kissmetrics are both his, and they're both really useful tools in their own right. Definitely worth taking a look at. Thank you. Yes.
I just had a question. Kind of a quick circle that. Who would you recommend as a thought leader in user experience? Like, who do you read or who do you follow?
There are a couple that have some really amazing blogs. Some of them that I pulled from this stuff. Let me tweet the links to them so that I can think through them and just grab a couple of the key ones out. That's a great question. I appreciate you asking that, because sometimes all it takes is some reading on your own time to really get caught up on, kind of what's trending, what's not trending, and kind of, you want to make sure you pick the right people to follow. So, all right. I think I'm getting summed out. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope it was something that you can take away a little bit of something to make for a better user experience for your users.